A millionaire finds a woman and children living hidden in his old house. And what does he do? Alejandro Herrera took a deep breath as he saw the rusted gate of the property he hadn't visited in over 15 years. At 42, the businessman had become one of the wealthiest men in the Toluca Valley. But that simple house in the interior of the state of Mexico represented everything he wanted to forget about his humble childhood. Now he needed to sell the land for a large real estate development that promised to multiply his fortune. The woman who appeared at the door was clearly frightened and tried to hide a child behind her. Alejandro noticed the faded fabric of her pink dress and the protective way she held a small child in her arms, while a girl clung to her dirty skirt. She couldn't hide the panic in her brown eyes when she realized they had been discovered. "Please, sir, I can explain," the woman said with a trembling voice. "How did you get in here?" Alejandro asked, trying to remain calm as he observed the state of the house, which should have been empty. The woman lowered her head, squeezing the child in her arms tighter. "I am Patricia Navarro. The house seemed abandoned for years. We had nowhere to go." Alejandro looked past her and noticed that the living room, once covered in dust and cobwebs, now showed signs of life. There were rags drying on an improvised clothesline, some kitchen utensils organized on an old table, and mattresses laid out on the floor. The smell of simple food came from the kitchen. "How long have you been living here?" he asked, still processing the situation. 3 months, Patricia replied, her voice almost a whisper. The child in her arms couldn't have been more than 3 years old, with dark hair and large eyes that observed Alejandro with curiosity. The girl, appearing about 6 years old, remained hidden behind her mother, watching him warily. "Listen, I understand you were in need, but this property is going to be sold," Alejandro said, trying to sound firm but not cruel. "You can't stay here." Patricia closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering courage. "You are the owner, aren't you? I always knew someone would come one day. I didn't think it would be so soon." "Always knew?" Neighbors had commented that the house belonged to a family from the state of Mexico, that the son had become rich and never returned. Alejandro felt a pang in his chest. It was true that he had fled that place as soon as he could. The memories of his poor childhood, of his mother struggling alone to raise him after his father abandoned them, of going hungry and cold in that very house, were things he preferred to bury in the past. "Well, I'm back now," he said, more dryly than he intended. Patricia took a step forward, still holding the child. "Sir, I know we have no right, but would you be able to give us a week, just 1 week, so I can find another place?" 1 week. Alejandro hesitated. He was in a hurry to close the deal, but something in the woman's desperate determination made him pause. "Please, I promise we'll leave without causing any trouble. It's just, I have nowhere to take them now." Alejandro observed the 2 children. The boy had relaxed in Patricia's arms and was now watching him with interest, while the girl remained shy. They seemed well cared for despite their simple and mended clothes. "They are your children." "They are my siblings," Patricia replied, with a mixture of pride and sadness in her voice. "I've taken care of them since our parents. Since we were left alone." Alejandro felt something churn in his stomach. There was something about this situation that stirred memories he tried to keep buried. "All right," he said finally. 1 week. But then you'll have to go." The relief on Patricia's face was instant and touching. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. You won't regret it." "Alejandro. My name is Alejandro Herrera. Thank you, Don Alejandro." He cast one last look at the house and the 3 figures at the door before turning to leave. As he walked back to the car, he couldn't get Patricia's image out of his head, holding those children as if they were the most precious thing in the world. On the drive back to the state of Mexico, Alejandro called his lawyer. "Dr. Salinas, I need to postpone the sale of the property in Cuernavaca for a week." "Any problem, Alejandro? The buyer is eager to close the deal. Just a few matters I need to resolve first. A week won't make a difference." But even as he said it, Alejandro knew he was lying to himself. Something had changed that afternoon, and he couldn't quite define what. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, take the opportunity to leave your like. And, above all, subscribe to the channel. That helps a lot to those of us who are starting out now. Continuing, 2 days later, Alejandro found himself driving back to Cuernavaca for no specific reason. He told himself he needed to check if the family was keeping the agreement. But deep down, he knew there was something more. The house exerted a strange pull on him, like a magnet drawing him towards the past he tried so hard to avoid. When he arrived, he found Patricia hanging laundry on the makeshift clothesline in the yard. She wore the same pink dress, but now he noticed it was clean and well ironed. The children were playing nearby, with toys made from scraps, tin cars, and a doll that looked hand-sewn. "Don Alejandro," Patricia exclaimed, clearly surprised. "Did something happen?" "No, I just came to see how things are going." In reality, he wanted to understand how that woman had transformed the old house into a home. Even with few resources, everything was organized and clean. There were wildflowers in old tins serving as pots, and the windows were open, letting in the sunlight. "Would you like to come in? I've just made coffee," Patricia offered. Alejandro hesitated but ended up accepting. Inside, the house was unrecognizable. Patricia had fixed up the old furniture that was in storage, put up curtains made of scraps on the windows, and even created a little study corner for the girl with books piled on a wooden table. "Where did you get those books?" Alejandro asked, recognizing some titles. "They were in a trunk in the attic," Patricia replied, serving coffee in a chipped mug. "They must be from when someone lived here. Sofia loves to read, so I thought it wouldn't hurt." Alejandro picked up one of the books. It was a copy of The Little Prince that had been given to him for his 8th birthday. His mother had saved for months to buy it. On the first page, his childhood handwriting was still there. "Alejandro Herrera, 2nd year. This book is mine," he murmured more to himself. "Pardon?" Patricia appeared, concerned. "I didn't know. Sofia, come here." The girl appeared shy, still wary of Alejandro. "Sofia, these books belonged to Don Alejandro when he was a child. You need to return them." "No," Alejandro said quickly. "It's not necessary. She can keep them." Sofia's eyes lit up. "Really?" "May I, sir?" "Of course. And just call me Alejandro." Patricia smiled for the first time since he had met her. "Sofia is learning to read on her own. I teach her what I can." "But you didn't go to school?" "I went up to 4th grade. After my parents died, I had to work to take care of the little ones." Alejandro observed Patricia as she spoke. There was a dignity in her posture that contrasted with the simplicity of her clothes. She wasn't asking for pity, just explaining the facts. "And what do you do now? Sewing?" "At night, when they sleep, I sew clothes for a shop in the city. It's not much, but it's enough for the basics." Alejandro noticed the old sewing machine in the corner of the room, surrounded by fabrics and threads organized in shoeboxes. "It's a lot of work for one person," he commented. "We manage," Patricia replied simply. "We've always managed." The little boy, whom Patricia had introduced as Miguel, approached Alejandro with curiosity. Without fear, he offered the tin car to the man. "Play with me." Alejandro looked at the crude toy and then at the child's trusting eyes. It had been years since a child had approached him so naturally. In his life as an executive, he barely interacted with families. "I don't know how to play very well," he admitted. "It's easy," Miguel said, sitting on the floor and making the car move. Vroom, vroom. Almost without realizing it, Alejandro found himself sitting on the floorboards of the living room, pushing tin cars with a 3-year-old boy. Patricia watched them from the kitchen with a discreet smile. "How old are they?" Alejandro asked Sofia, who had approached shyly. "I'm 7. Miguel is 3, and Patricia is 27. But she looks older because she gets tired," the girl replied with typical childish honesty. Patricia blushed a little. "Sofia, but it's true," the girl insisted. "You stay up all night sewing." Alejandro looked at Patricia more closely. Now that Sofia had mentioned it, he noticed the subtle dark circles under her eyes, her hands dry from work, the way she moved as if carrying an invisible weight on her shoulders. "Are you eating well?" he asked without thinking. "Of course," Patricia replied, a little defensively. "I take good care of them." "That's not what I meant." "We don't need charity, Don Alejandro," she said. "I just needed a temporary roof." The response surprised him. In fact, it surprised him positively. In his business world, he was used to people who always wanted something from him. Patricia was different. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend." "You didn't offend," she softened her tone. "It's just that I learned. You have to maintain your dignity, right? Regardless of the situation." Miguel tugged at the hem of Alejandro's trousers. "Uncle Alejandro, are you coming back tomorrow?" The question took Alejandro by surprise. No one had called him uncle in years. "I don't know. Maybe I want you to come back," Miguel said, with the disarming sincerity of children. Alejandro felt a strange sensation in his chest, a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. When he left the house that afternoon, he took with him the image of Patricia, seeing him off at the door with the 2 children by her side. And for the first time in years, he found himself eager for the next day. The next morning, Alejandro canceled 2 meetings and drove to Cuernavaca again. This time, he brought some toys he bought at a shop on the way. Nothing too expensive, just some coloring books and pencils for Sofia and a toy truck for Miguel. When Patricia opened the door and saw the gifts, her expression stiffened. "Don Alejandro, I already told you it's not charity," she interrupted him. "It's a thank you for taking such good care of the house." It was a lie, but a kind lie that allowed Patricia to accept without hurting her pride. "The children will be very happy," she said finally, smiling, and they truly were. Sofia hugged the books as if they were treasures, and Miguel immediately began playing with the truck, making engine sounds that echoed through the house. "You didn't have to do this," Patricia said softly as they watched the children play. "I wanted to," Alejandro replied, and he realized he was sincere. They sat on the terrace of the house, watching Sofia teach Miguel how to draw with the new pencils. The afternoon sun cast a golden light that made everything seem more beautiful and serene. "Can I ask something?" Alejandro said after a moment of silence. "Of course. Why here? Why did you choose this house?" Patricia was silent for a moment, as if deciding how much to tell. "There was a young woman in town who told me about this house. She said it had been empty for years, but that good things used to happen here, that the owner of the house helped those in need." Alejandro felt a pang in his chest. His mother really did that. Even with little, she always shared with those who had less. "The young woman said that perhaps this would be a safe place for someone in difficulty," Patricia continued. "And I needed a lot of security." "Security from what?" Patricia hesitated, looking at the children playing. "From my family. They wanted to force me to marry a man I don't know to settle some debts. When I refused and said I would take the children with me, they said it was better if I disappeared for good." The coldness in her voice as she told this shocked Alejandro. "So you fled?" "Fled. With them. They are the only family I have now. And the man you were supposed to marry, is he looking for them? I don't know. I hope not. I hope he has found someone else to solve his problems." Alejandro watched Patricia watching the children. There was something fierce and protective in her gaze, like a mother defending her young. "Don't you regret leaving everything behind?" "Regret what?" she challenged him. "For protecting two innocent children? For refusing to be sold like cattle? Never." The conviction in her voice impressed Alejandro. He knew executives who didn't have half the determination he saw in that young woman. "And what if I found you a better job? Something in the city?" Patricia looked at him suspiciously. "Why? You don't even know me." "Because," Alejandro paused, trying to find the right words. "Because I think my mother would do the same." That answer seemed to satisfy Patricia. "Your mother who lived here?" "Yes, she died 5 years ago. She was a very good person." "And why did you never come back here?" The question was direct, without beating around the bush. Alejandro appreciated the honesty. "Because this place reminded me of things I wanted to forget. Poverty, hardship, the feeling of not being in control of my own life. And now?" Alejandro looked around. The house seemed different with life inside it. Children laughing, Patricia humming as she folded clothes, the smell of home-cooked food coming from the kitchen. "Now, I don't know. It's different." That night, Alejandro left the house with more questions than answers. The next day, instead of going to the office, he drove back to Cuernavaca, and the day after that too. Without realizing it, he had created a routine. The week he had given Patricia was coming to an end, but Alejandro couldn't imagine evicting that family. Every day that passed, he became more involved with their stories, their daily struggles, the way they cared for each other. It was on the 5th day that he received the call that would change everything. "Mr. Herrera," it's Patricia's voice, calling from the village's public telephone. "I need to speak with you, it's urgent." Alejandro felt his stomach clench. "What happened?" "He found me. The man my family wants me to marry is here in the village asking about us." Alejandro didn't hesitate. "Stay inside the house. Lock everything. I'm coming." For the first time since he met Patricia, Alejandro drove over the speed limit. When he arrived at the house, he found the 3 figures huddled in the living room, clearly frightened. Patricia held Miguel on her lap, while Sofia clung to her skirt. "He went by here," Patricia said as soon as Alejandro entered. "He knocked on the door, shouted my name, said I was coming back whether I wanted to or not. How did he know you were here? Some neighbor must have mentioned it. Small town, isn't it? News travels fast." Alejandro felt a rage he hadn't experienced in years. The thought of someone threatening that family awakened primitive instincts he didn't know he possessed. "Is he still in town?" "I think so. He said he was going to bring back my brothers, that they sent him to get us." "Your brothers?" "Yes, my blood brothers, the older ones. They support the marriage because they'll get money. Alejandro clenched his fists. How can a family sell their own sister? Well, he can't force you to do anything. You're of age. You have the right to choose. You don't understand, Patricia said, tears in her eyes. In my town, in my environment, when the family decides something, there's not much you can do, especially being a woman. So, what do you want to do? I don't know. If we leave here, we have nowhere to go. If we stay, he'll keep insisting, and I'm afraid of what he might do to the children. Alejandro looked at Miguel and Sofia, who didn't fully understand what was happening but sensed the fear in the atmosphere. You will stay, he said, making a decision. I will sort this out. How? Leave it to me. Patricia looked him in the eyes, and she must have seen something that reassured her, because she nodded. Thank you. Alejandro spent the night at the house, sleeping on the sofa, to ensure the family was safe. The next morning, he had a serious conversation with his lawyer. Dr. Salinas, I need you to explain to me the rights of a woman in a forced marriage situation. Forced marriage, Alejandro? That's a crime. The Constitution guarantees. I know it's a crime, but explain to me how we protect someone who is being pressured by their own family. Following the conversation with the lawyer, Alejandro drove to the city of Cuernavaca to find the man who was threatening Patricia. It wasn't difficult to find him. In a small town, strangers draw attention. Ramiro Molina was a man of about 50, short and robust, with an expression of someone used to getting his way through intimidation. Alejandro found him in the town's main bar, speaking loudly about his rights over Patricia. Are you Ramiro Molina? Alejandro asked, approaching the table. Who wants to know? My name is Alejandro Herrera. I need to speak with you about Patricia Navarro. Ramiro's eyes gleamed with interest. Ah, so you know where she is. Excellent. Take me there, and I'll pick her up. Alejandro said, sit down, in a tone that allowed no argument. There was something in Alejandro's posture, the way he dressed and spoke, that made Ramiro obey instinctively. Listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you, Alejandro continued. Patricia is not going to marry you. She doesn't want to. And in Mexico, forced marriage is a crime. If you continue to harass her, I will call the police. Police. Ramiro let out a bitter laugh. I was going to say I'm looking for my fiancée, that her family owes me money. I will say that you are threatening a woman and 2 children. That lands you in jail. And who are you to interfere in this? Alejandro took a card from his pocket and placed it on the table. It was his business card with the company name and all his titles. Ramiro read the card, and his expression changed completely. You are the owner of Herrera de Sarrolos, among other things? Yes. Alejandro's name was known throughout the region. Ramiro swallowed hard. Look, Don Alejandro, I didn't know you were involved. Well, now you do. Patricia is under my protection. If you or anyone from your family comes near her again, you will have to explain it to me. Understood? Ramiro nodded quickly. But what about the money your family owes me? How much? 15,000. Alejandro took a checkbook from his pocket and wrote a check instantly. Here you go. Now you have nothing to do with Patricia, but sign here. Alejandro placed a piece of paper on the table. It was a document his lawyer had prepared, stating that Ramiro renounced any claim to Patricia. Sign and leave. Never come back. Ramiro signed without argument. When Alejandro returned to the house and told Patricia what had happened, she cried, not from sadness, but from relief. How can I ever thank you for this? She asked, tears in her eyes. You don't have to thank me for anything. Just stay as long as you want. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, take the opportunity to leave your like and, above all, subscribe to the channel. That helps us a lot, those of us who are starting out now. Continuing. The days that followed were different. Without Ramiro's threat, Patricia relaxed in a way Alejandro hadn't seen before. She smiled more, played with the children, sang while she cooked. The house transformed into a true home. Alejandro found himself visiting every day. In the morning, before going to the office in the state of Mexico, he would stop by the house for breakfast with the family. In the afternoon, when he returned, he would stop by again for dinner. Without realizing it, his routine had completely changed. Don't you have your own family? Patricia asked one of those afternoons as they watched the children play in the yard. No, I never married, never found the right person. Why not? Alejandro thought about the answer. I think I always thought love was a luxury, that I first had to build my financial life. Then I would think about relationships. And now I realize that maybe I've been thinking wrong my whole life. Patricia smiled. Life has its ways, doesn't it? One plans one thing, and it insists on being another. That's true. They fell silent, watching Miguel try to teach Sofia to play football with a ball made of old socks. "Can I ask you something?" Alejandro said. "Of course. Aren't you afraid of having a relationship with someone after everything you've been through?" Patricia considered the question. "I'm afraid of trusting the wrong person, but I'm not afraid of love itself. I believe love is the only thing truly worth it in this life, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because when it hurts, it means it was real." Patricia's simple wisdom constantly surprised Alejandro. In his corporate world, people spoke complicatedly about simple things. Patricia did the opposite. It was that night that Alejandro realized he was falling in love. It wasn't a dramatic or cinematic moment. It was just watching Patricia put the children to bed, singing a lullaby in her soft voice, that he understood his life had changed forever. The following week, Alejandro made a decision that surprised everyone who knew him. He canceled the sale of the house. "Alejandro, have you gone mad?" his partner Eduardo said during a meeting. "It's a 2 million real deal. I know how much it's worth. So why are you backing out?" "Because I decided not to sell it. But you said that house only brought you bad memories." "The memories have changed." Eduardo looked at him as if he had lost his mind. "This has to do with that family living there." Alejandro didn't answer, but his expression was enough of an answer. "Alejandro, for God's sake, don't tell me you're getting emotionally involved with a woman you don't even know well. I know her better than I've known anyone in my life in 2 weeks. That's ridiculous." "Maybe it is, but that's how I feel." That afternoon, Alejandro went to the house to tell Patricia his decision. "I canceled the sale," he said directly. Patricia, who was sewing at the machine, stopped what she was doing. "What? The house? I'm not going to sell it anymore." "But why?" Alejandro took a deep breath. "Because I discovered that this place can still be a home, like it was when my mother lived here." Patricia looked at him in silence for a long moment. "And what does that mean for us?" "It means you can stay if you want, for as long as you want." "Alejandro, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything now. Just think about it, okay?" Patricia nodded, still processing the news. That night, after the children fell asleep, she and Alejandro had a long conversation on the house's terrace. They talked about dreams, fears, about how life sometimes leads us down paths we never imagined. "I'm afraid," Patricia admitted. "Afraid of what?" "Of dreaming, of waking up one day and finding out. All this was just desperation on my part." "It's not desperation," Alejandro said. "I feel it too. This connection is serious, isn't it? Just pity for us." "Patricia, look me in the eyes." He turned towards her. "This is not pity. This is… I don't know what to call this. I just know I've never felt anything like it." They kissed for the first time there on the terrace of the house where Alejandro had grown up, under the stars his mother used to show him when he was a child. The following months were a period of pure discovery. Alejandro learned what it was to have a real family, not just obligations or responsibilities, but the genuine joy of coming home and being greeted by people who cared about him. Miguel began to call him Dad, naturally, without anyone suggesting it. Sofia, more reserved, took longer, but eventually opened up to him too. Patricia blossomed like a flower that had finally found the right soil to grow. Alejandro remodeled the house completely, but with care to maintain its essence. He modernized the kitchen, fixed the roof, painted the walls, but preserved the details that gave the place personality. He created a room for each child and transformed the old storage room into a sewing workshop for Patricia. "You don't need to sew for that shop anymore," he told her one morning. "You can work for yourself, do the things you love." "I like working, Alejandro. I don't want to be kept. I'm not talking about keeping you. I'm talking about giving you the freedom to do the work you love." And so Patricia started her own business, sewing custom clothing for women in the region. In a short time, she had more orders than she could handle. It was on one of those busy days that they received an unexpected visitor. Alejandro was playing with Miguel in the yard when he heard Patricia shout from inside. He ran into the house and found her standing at the door, looking at a man of about 40 standing there. "Who is it?" Alejandro asked softly. "My brother Ricardo." The man approached, clearly uncomfortable. "Patricia, may I come in? I need to talk to you." "About what?" Patricia's voice was tense. "About family. About what happened." Alejandro stood next to Patricia in a discreetly protective gesture. "This is my home," Patricia said. "If you want to talk, it will be here, in front of him." Ricardo looked at Alejandro, clearly trying to understand who he was. "All right," Patricia said finally. "I came to apologize to you. Apologize for what we did, for the forced marriage, for throwing you out of the house. We were desperate because of the debts, but that doesn't justify what we did." Patricia remained silent, processing her brother's words. "And now you come here because I heard you're doing well, that you found someone who loves you, that the children are being cared for, and I realized we lost the best person in our family because of greed." "You're right," Patricia said without resentment. "Yes, you lost. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I regret it every day. And the debts were paid. The man you were going to marry, someone paid him, and he backed off. Now we're starting over, trying to do things right." Patricia looked at Alejandro, who made a discreet gesture, indicating the decision was hers. "Thank you for coming here and saying this," she said finally. "It means something, but I can't just forget what happened. I understand. Perhaps one day we can talk again, but not today." Ricardo nodded, greeted the children who were watching everything from the window, and left. "Are you all right?" Alejandro asked after his brother left. "It's strange, but I'm all right. I think I had already forgiven them a long time ago. I just didn't know it." "And how do you feel now?" "Free. Completely free." It was that night that Alejandro proposed to Patricia. It wasn't planned. The words simply came out of his mouth as they washed the dishes together after dinner. "Marry me," he said suddenly. Patricia almost dropped the plate she was drying. "What?" "Marry me. You, me, the children. Let's be a real family." "Alejandro, I know it's soon. I know you might think it's precipitate, but I've never been so sure of anything in my life." Patricia put the kitchen towel on the table and turned to him. "Are you sure? You won't regret it when the passion passes." "Patricia, what I feel for you isn't just passion. It's like I've found my other half, like being in the world finally makes sense. And the children? The children are already my children in my heart. I want to adopt them officially, give them my surname, take care of them forever." Patricia began to cry, but they were tears of happiness. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I want to marry you." The wedding was simple, but perfect. They held the ceremony in the house's courtyard, decorated with flowers. Patricia grew in her garden. Miguel was the ring bearer, carrying the rings on a cushion Sofia had embroidered. Few guests, but each one special. Doña Teresa, the elderly neighbor who had told Patricia about the house, was the godmother. She cried throughout the ceremony, saying she always knew good things happened in that house. After the civil ceremony, Alejandro officially adopted Miguel and Sofia. When the judge asked if they wanted to change their surname to Herrera, Sofia answered without hesitation, "Yes, Your Honor. Now we are a real family." Married life brought joys and challenges neither of them expected. Patricia had to get used to a more comfortable financial life, but she always maintained her principles of simplicity and generosity. Alejandro learned that being a father wasn't just about providing financial support, but about being present in the small moments, helping with homework, kissing scraped knees, telling bedtime stories. Miguel turned out to be an extremely affectionate and outgoing child. He adapted quickly to the new life and always treated Alejandro as if he were his biological father. Sofia, more introverted, took longer to open up completely, but when she did, she developed a special relationship with Alejandro based on their shared passion for books. Patricia expanded her sewing business and became a respected small entrepreneur in the region. She continued to keep prices accessible and always set aside time to do free work for families in need, following the example she had learned from Alejandro's mother. "It's important to pay it forward," she would say. "We received a second chance. Other people deserve one too." Alejandro discovered a vocation he never knew he had: teaching. He started by giving maths lessons to Sofia, then to other children in the neighborhood. In a short time, he was organizing informal tutoring sessions in his own home. "My mother would be proud," he told Patricia one of those afternoons, watching 5 children doing homework at the kitchen table. "She would be very proud," Patricia agreed. "You honored her memory." Years passed, bringing small joys and big transformations. The house, once destined for abandonment, became a center of life and love. Neighbors frequently stopped by for advice, to borrow sugar, or simply to chat on the terrace. Miguel grew up and became a responsible and studious child, always willing to help others. Sofia developed a passion for reading that led her to dream of becoming a teacher. Patricia established herself as one of the most sought-after seamstresses in the region, but never lost the simplicity that characterized her. Alejandro discovered that true wealth wasn't in his bank account, but in the laughter that echoed through the house, in family dinners, in the nights he fell asleep hugging Patricia, listening to the children's footsteps in the hallway. It was on a Sunday afternoon, 5 years after the wedding, that Alejandro was organizing papers in his office when he found a letter Patricia had written him for their first wedding anniversary, but never delivered. Alejandro, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and just watch you sleep, trying to understand how life brought me here. How a woman who was fleeing her own family, desperate and hopeless, found true love in a house that seemed abandoned. You transformed our lives in a way I never thought possible, not just because you gave us financial security, but because you gave us something far more valuable, the feeling of belonging somewhere, of being loved unconditionally. Miguel the other day asked me if I remembered what it was like before you appeared. I told him yes, I remember, but it seems like another lifetime. It seems like we were other people. Thank you for seeing beyond our situation. Thank you for choosing to stay when you could have left. Thank you for transforming a ruined house into a home full of love. I love you more than words can express, Patricia. Alejandro read the letter 3 times, moved. When Patricia came home from work that afternoon, he was waiting for her on the terrace with the letter in his hands. You found it? She said, smiling. Why didn't you ever give it to me? Because I thought I was being too sentimental. You already knew how I felt. Not like this, not with these words. It's beautiful. Every word is still true. They stood embracing on the terrace, watching the sun set over the property that had become so much more than a house. It had become a symbol that second chances truly exist. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, take the opportunity to leave your like and, above all, subscribe to the channel. That helps us a lot, those of us who are starting out now. Continuing, 8 years after the wedding, when Miguel was 11 and Sofia was 14, the Herrera family received an unexpected proposal. A local television producer had heard about their story and wanted to make a documentary about second chances and unconventional families. I don't know if it's a good idea, Patricia said during dinner, after Alejandro told them about the proposal. Our lives aren't a show, but it could inspire other people, argued Sofia, always the most thoughtful, showing that not all stories have to end badly. What do you think? Alejandro asked Miguel. I think we can help other families who went through what we went through, the boy said, surprising everyone with his maturity. After much discussion, they decided to accept, on the condition that they would have complete control over the final content. The documentary A Home, a Family aired 6 months later and had a much greater impact than any of them expected. Hundreds of people wrote letters telling their own stories of hardship and overcoming. One letter in particular caught Patricia's attention. It was from an 8-year-old pregnant young woman who had been expelled from home by her family for refusing to marry an older man. Could we help her? Patricia suggested. How? She could stay here for a while until she gets organized. Alejandro looked at Patricia with admiration. Even after so many years of security and stability, she was still thinking first of helping other people. Are you sure? It's a big responsibility. I'm sure. Isn't that how our family started? With someone offering refuge to those in need. And so Daniela, 18 years old and 6 months pregnant, moved into the guest room they had prepared specifically for such situations. The house was once again filled with new energy, new challenges, new joys. Daniela gave birth to a baby girl, Luz, and stayed in the house for 2 years while she finished her studies and established herself professionally. When she finally moved into her own home, she left behind an extended family that would support her forever. Our house has a vocation, Alejandro told Patricia one night after Daniela moved out. It attracts people who need a new beginning, just like your mother's did, Patricia replied. The tradition continued, and indeed it did. In the following years, the Herrera house temporarily housed an elderly woman who had lost her home in a fire, a young man coming out of the adoption system, a single mother fleeing an abusive relationship. Each person who passed through left their mark, and took with them the certainty that good people existed in the world. Miguel graduated from high school with the highest grades in his class and won a scholarship to study engineering. In his graduation speech, he spoke about chosen families and how love can transform anything. Sofia graduated as a teacher and returned to teach at the public school in the village where she had studied. She specialized in children with learning difficulties, always remembering how Alejandro had patiently taught her maths in the kitchen of the house. Patricia became a successful small businesswoman, but never lost the simplicity that characterized her. She created a microcredit program for women who wanted to start their own businesses, always offering more than money, offering mentorship, emotional support, and the certainty that they were not alone. Alejandro, inspired by his wife's work, created a foundation that offered temporary housing to families in vulnerable situations. He bought several properties in the region and transformed them into transitional homes, always following the model they had developed at home. Not just shelter, but comprehensive support so that people could rebuild their lives. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they renewed their vows on the same balcony where they had kissed for the first time. This time, there were more guests, the many people whose lives they had touched over the years. Doña Teresa, now in her 80s, was once again the godmother. In her speech, she said, "I always knew this house was special. Alejandro's mother worked miracles here, and now he and Patricia continue to do them. They are not supernatural miracles, they are miracles of the human heart." Miguel, now 16 and almost Alejandro's height, gave a speech that moved everyone. "When I was little, I didn't understand why some children had biological parents, and others, like me and Sofia, had parents of the heart. Now I understand that it doesn't matter how the family is formed. What matters is the love that exists within it. Alejandro may not have fathered me, but he raised me. Patricia may not have given birth to me, but she gave me life. This family taught me that love isn't about DNA, it's about choice, and I choose you every day." That night, after all the guests had left, Alejandro and Patricia were left alone on the balcony, as they did every night for 10 years. "Any regrets?" Patricia asked jokingly. "Only one," Alejandro replied. "Which one?" "I should have come back to this house much sooner. Maybe you weren't ready before. Maybe you needed to live everything you lived to be prepared to find us. Perhaps. Sometimes I think my mother knew I would come back one day, that I would find my family here." "She knew," Patricia said with conviction. "Mothers always know those things." They remained silent, listening to the sounds of the night in the countryside. From inside the house came familiar noises. Miguel, tinkering with some invention in his room. Sofia reading late. The kitchen clock marking the time. Patricia, "Yes, thank you." "Why?" "For teaching me that a home isn't a place. It's the people we love. For giving me a family. For turning this house into a place where miracles happen." "The miracles were always here," Patricia said. "You just needed to come home to find them." And so, on the porch of the house where it all began, surrounded by the love of their chosen family, Alejandro and Patricia continued to write their love story. A story that proved that no matter how difficult the beginning, it is always possible to create a happy ending when you have love, courage, and faith in the transformative power of human generosity. The night went on, but they remained there, embracing, listening to the familiar sounds of their home, full of life and stories. Inside, they could hear Miguel working on his projects, Sofia preparing lessons for the next day, and the soft ticking of the kitchen clock, marking the precious moments of a life lived with purpose and love. At that moment, Alejandro knew with absolute certainty that he was the richest man in the world, not for his bank account, but for the true wealth he had built. A united family, a home filled with love, and the certainty that, no matter what happened, he would never be alone again. The love story between Alejandro and Patricia became a legend in the city, but for them, it was always simply the life they chose to build together, one day at a time, with much love, patience, and unwavering faith that the best miracles are those we create with our own hands and hearts. Years passed, and the tradition of helping families in need strengthened. The Herrera house became regionally known as a safe harbor, a place where desperate people could find not just shelter, but hope. Patricia developed a special program for women who had gone through situations similar to hers. She offered not only temporary housing but professional training courses, psychological support, and, most importantly, living proof that it was possible to rebuild one's life completely. "Every woman who comes through here carries a piece of our story," Patricia would say during the weekly meetings she organized, "and leaves a piece of hers. This way, we are creating a network of strong women who support each other." Alejandro, for his part, expanded his work with young people. He created a business mentorship program for boys and girls who were aging out of the foster care system or came from broken homes. He taught that success wasn't measured only by money, but by the positive impact on the lives of others. Miguel graduated as an engineer and returned to work in his father's company, but with a specific mission: to develop affordable housing projects that followed the model of transitional housing the family had created. His first project was a housing complex that included community spaces, collective gardens, and professional training centers. "I want every family that lives here to have the same opportunity we had," he would say during his project presentations. "A place that isn't just shelter, but a starting point for a better life." Sofia became a recognized educator, specializing in inclusive pedagogy. She developed special teaching methods for children who had experienced family trauma, always remembering her own experience of finding an escape and growth in books. On Alejandro and Patricia's 20th wedding anniversary, the celebration was different. Instead of an intimate party, they organized a large gathering with all the families they had helped over the years. Daniela, the first young woman they took in, was now a nurse and brought her daughter Luz, a bright one, 3-year-old. Doña Carmen, the elderly woman who lost her home in the fire, had become the adoptive grandmother to several children in the neighborhood. Javier, the young man who left the adoption system, now ran an NGO for at-risk adolescents. "Just look at what we achieved together," Patricia said emotionally, observing the courtyard full of people whose lives had become intertwined through that house. "My mother would be so proud," Alejandro murmured, remembering the simple woman who planted the first seeds of generosity in that place. During the celebration, a surprise moved everyone. Ricardo, Patricia's brother, who had appeared years earlier asking for forgiveness, arrived with his family. Over the past few years, they had slowly rebuilt their relationship, and he had become an advocate for women facing domestic violence in his own city. "Patricia taught me that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing, not letting the past determine the future," he said during his brief speech. "She saved me too, in her own way." Patricia embraced her brother emotionally. It had taken years to achieve a healthy relationship again. But the perseverance and unconditional love she learned from Alejandro made even that possible. When night fell and the guests left, the family gathered on the terrace as they always did. Miguel and Sofia, now adults but still living at home while establishing their careers, joined their parents for the nightly ritual of talking about the day. "Can I ask a question I've always wanted to ask?" Sofia said. "Of course," Alejandro replied. "Did you really not know you were falling in love with Mom from day one, because it was obvious to us?" Alejandro and Patricia looked at each other and laughed. "Was it that obvious?" Alejandro asked. "Dad, you came here every day with flimsy excuses," Miguel said. "I came to check on the house. I came to see if you were all right. I brought some things." Nobody believed those stories. "And Mom would get all nervous when she knew you were coming," Sofia continued. "She'd change her clothes 3 times, do her hair, rehearse conversations." "I didn't do that," protested Patricia, blushing. "Yes, you did," said the 2 children in unison, laughing. "All right, maybe I did a little," Patricia admitted. "But it was love at first sight, at least on my part." "Mine too," Alejandro said. "I just took longer to accept what I was feeling." "And us?" asked Miguel. "When did you decide you wanted to be our parents forever?" Alejandro thought about the question. "From the first day," he said finally. "When I saw you playing in the yard with those makeshift toys, you had already stolen my heart. I just didn't know it yet." "That's true," Alejandro admitted. "That day, I realized I didn't want a life without you anymore." They fell silent for a moment, each lost in their own memories of that time of discovery and change. "Do you regret anything?" Sofia asked. "Running away from my biological family," Patricia replied. "It was never the best decision I made in my life." "And you, Dad, do you regret canceling the sale of the house?" "Sofia, canceling that sale was the smartest decision I've ever made in my life. This house, this family, you are my greatest asset." "And if none of this had happened," Miguel continued, "always the family's philosopher, if you had never met." Alejandro and Patricia looked at each other. "I would probably be a rich and lonely man," Alejandro said. "I would have everything money can buy, but nothing that truly matters. And I would be a brave woman raising 2 children alone," Patricia said. "We would have managed to survive, but we would never have known this complete happiness." "So, was it destiny?" Sofia asked. "I don't know if it was destiny," Patricia replied. "I think it was a series of right decisions. I chose courage when I fled. Alejandro chose compassion when he let us stay. We both chose love when we could have chosen fear. And you chose trust when you could have chosen distrust," added Alejandro, looking at Miguel and Sofia. "You accepted a stranger into your lives." "You were never a stranger to us," Miguel said. "From the first day, we felt you belonged here." That conversation on the terrace became one of the family's most cherished memories. Years later, when Miguel and Sofia had their own children, they would tell this story to the children, explaining how sometimes the best families are the ones we choose, not the ones we are born into. The house continued to be a refuge for people in need. As Alejandro and Patricia grew older, Miguel and Sofia gradually took over the responsibility of continuing the tradition. They created an official foundation with a professional structure, but always maintained the personal and loving essence that characterized their parents' work. Patricia, at 50, became a regional reference in working with women in vulnerable situations. Alejandro, at 65, still ran his company but dedicated most of his time to social work and mentoring young entrepreneurs. On their 20th wedding anniversary, they took a special trip. They returned to the city where Patricia had been born, not to reconcile with the past, but to help other women who were living situations similar to what she had faced. "It's strange being here," Patricia said, as they walked through the streets of her childhood. "It seems like another lifetime." "It was another lifetime," Alejandro replied. "You are a completely different person from the woman who fled here 20 years ago. We are all different people." They visited the house where Patricia had grown up and met the family now living there. It was a young single mother with 3 children, struggling to survive with informal jobs. "Can I help?" Patricia offered, introducing herself. The conversation that followed changed that family's life. Within weeks, the young mother was participating in Patricia's training programs, and her children had received scholarships to the school Sofia ran. "Do you realize you're doing the same thing you did with us 20 years ago?" Alejandro commented during the drive back. "What thing?" "Offering more than material help, offering hope." "I learned from you," Patricia smiled. "You taught me that helping people isn't about giving money, it's about believing in them. Actually, you're the one who taught me that." When they returned home that night, they found a surprise. Miguel had organized a surprise party with all the families they had helped over the years. The courtyard was decorated with photos documenting 2 decades of love and solidarity. "We wanted to show you the impact you've had on so many people's lives," Miguel explained. "I don't know if you have any idea how many lives you've touched. It was impressive. There were over 100 people at the party, each with a story of overcoming connected in some way to that house and that family. Children who had grown up, young people who had graduated, women who had rebuilt their lives, families who had found stability. This is the real legacy you built," Sofia said during her speech. "It's not houses or companies. It's transformed lives, realized dreams, futures that exist because you believed in people when they needed it most." Patricia couldn't hold back tears. "We just did what anyone would do," she said. "No, Mum," Sofia replied softly. "You did what anyone should do, but few actually do. You opened your heart and your home to strangers. You risked your own happiness to give others a chance at happiness." That night, after all the guests had left, Alejandro and Patricia were left alone on the terrace, as they did every night for months. The party had been beautiful, but they always cherished moments of shared silence. "If I had met you at 20, do you think it would have worked between us?" Patricia asked suddenly. "No," Alejandro replied honestly. "At 20, I was too ambitious, too focused on making money. I wouldn't have known how to recognize your value. And I was too naive, too dependent on family opinions. I wouldn't have had the courage to fight for what I wanted. So we met at the right time, exactly the right time, when you were ready to be the man I needed and I was ready to be the woman you deserved. Do you think we would still be happy if we hadn't had this whole mission of helping other people?" Patricia thought about the question. "I think so, but it would be a lesser happiness, more selfish. What gave meaning to our lives was discovering that true love is one that overflows, that cannot remain contained only within the home." "My mother always said a phrase that only now I fully understand," Alejandro said. "Shared happiness is multiplied happiness." Your mother was a wise woman. She was, and she chose the right place to plant the seeds of generosity. This house was always special. No, Alejandro, the house became special because of the people who lived in it. First your mother, then us. The magic isn't in the walls, it's in the love cultivated within. They remained embraced, listening to the sounds of the night in the countryside. From inside the house came familiar noises. Miguel, tinkering with some invention in his room. Sofia, preparing lessons for the next day. The kitchen clock ticking away, marking the precious moments of a life lived with purpose and love. At that moment, Alejandro knew with absolute certainty that he was the richest man in the world. Not for his bank account, but for the true wealth he had built. A united family, a home filled with love, and the certainty that his life had made a difference in the world. And Patricia, looking at the man who had transformed her desperate flight into a journey of love and purpose, knew she had made all the right choices. Every brave choice, every moment of trust, every act of faith had led her exactly where she was meant to be, in the arms of the love of her life. Surrounded by the family she chose to build in a house where miracles happened every day through the simple act of loving unconditionally. The end of the story. Now tell me what you thought of this story and where you are watching from. If you have anything to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you think Alejandro and Patricia made the right decisions? We will be happy to read your opinion. Thank you very much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, Most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other exciting stories.